morning. Welcome to a new kind of video on my channel where I bring you along on my journey of getting back into traditional art making after several years of only doing digital painting. I've been slowly getting more and more into traditional painting again. I really love vintage artworks painted with watercolors, oils, and pastels. Works like this have been inspirations to me since my first collection. My goal with my illustration business has always been to make art that I would personally love to buy and display. Seeing as so many of my favorite prints are traditionally painted, naturally it made sense that I would try to make some traditional artworks of my own. Between my freelance job, running my illustration business, and making videos here on YouTube, I spend a lot of time behind a computer screen, so consider this like the touching grass of art making, if you will. And while it has been really refreshing, it has certainly not been easy. It's a steep learning curve, even as somebody that has a background in traditional painting. Not having a color picker, a fill tool, or an undo button has been brutal at times. So I thought it might be useful for me to share some of the techniques that I've learned to help me make that transition back to traditional painting easier, as well as just to kind of show the journey of how I'm learning and improving at my traditional painting. I'm going to be taking you through from start to finish of my latest full-size gouache painting. So look forward to the journey and the results at the end of this video. So anyway, without further rambling, let's just get into my latest traditional art process. Planning is definitely your friend when it comes to making traditional artwork, and for me, that almost always starts on the mood board. I have an ongoing Pinterest board of photo references that I add to whenever I see a photo that inspires me, so it's usually not difficult for me to put these together when I'm starting a new piece. So this is my current mood board for the painting that I am starting work on today. The idea is basically to have a cat inside of a grocery bag that is full of other goodies, maybe some flowers as well, because they're the main motifs, obviously, of my art are cats, food, and flowers. The images that I have here, it's a lot of just like classic grocery bag images, as well as references for how the cat might look in the bag. In terms of flowers, I'm not exactly sure which specific flower I want to do yet. I'm looking at poppies, baby's breath, and daisies. I'm feeling really springy, I think, with this piece. So I don't know, these flowers always make me think of spring, so I think I'm gonna go with something like that. Speaking of color scheme, one thing I do kind of have in my head is I want the background to be blue, a bit like this image here. I think that's really gonna pop against the green and the yellows and reds that will probably be included in the items that are in the bag. I also have a mood board of illustration and painting inspirations for this. Again, they play into the color scheme that I am planning for this, which is that bold blue background, but also details like how I might paint the paper bag, what kind of colors there might be in it. I always include some kind of like vintage ad or pin-up reference with most of my pieces of art, because I really like the kind of bold angular posing that you see in pin art. I really like the rendering style as well. It's quite like high contrast, but there's still smooth areas. I think the combination in general in pin-up art of having kind of like soft curves and like sort of the occasional very straight line really appeals to me and is maybe reflected in the way that I paint some of my artwork. And also just that timeless feel I really love. I think I try to like imbue that into a lot of my paintings, and I find it's really present in this kind of vintage style of illustration. And this is actually my own piece of art here, because I'm thinking this painting might have a slight similar vibe to this. This is an older piece, but particularly the way that the hands are holding the cat here and they're a more simple style. It kind of reminds me of what I see in pinup art sometimes, where they sort of almost have an unfinished element in the illustration. It could look kind of cool, and it'll be interesting to see how that translates into the gouache medium. But anyway, let's get on to making the thumbnails and color blockouts. So I did reach the end of my kind of thumbnail stage, and part of me feels like these all look exactly the same, but I'm just gonna say that's because I'm very clear about the vision that I was going for with these. The main thing that I was actually kind of exploring was the placement of the hands, if I'm going to include them. So this was one idea I really liked. I got the idea from this stock image that I had as one of my references. I liked the kind of, I don't know, like right angles of the arms coming into the shot. I think it's fine, but I quickly realized that including the hands in the shot does mean you're maybe a bit more limited on the amount that you can put coming out of the grocery bag, because there's a higher chance of it being obscured. Again, another idea was having the hand kind of grabbing the back of the grocery bag. I feel like maybe that will look a bit awkward if the grocery bag is really full, but I think we can also maybe suspend disbelief a little bit with this. The inspiration was kind of in this example where they're like grasping the kitten as if it's like by the scruff of its neck. I just don't know if this idea will work as well when the bag is full of stuff, so I'm not so sure about that one. Then the next idea was to kind of have the hand grasping from underneath. This was inspired by this reference image, although I don't really want this like quite this camera angle coming from below. I'd want the camera angle to be more either above or straight on so that we could see more of what's in the bag and the cat's face. And then the last thumbnail idea is inspired by this image here where the hand is coming from above and gripping the handles of the bag. I don't know about this one actually. I kind of like it. I think I'm wondering if like the cat's face and the hand would obscure too much of the contents, but maybe that is fine. We just need to get like a hint of the things behind and it's still going to give the vibe. So maybe this one and this one are my favorites right now. I will give it 5 minutes and have a cup of tea, and then I'll move on to the color block out stage to kind of develop these ideas a little bit further, and that will hopefully help me make some final decisions about the composition that I want to go with. Color is actually one of the things that was the hardest for me to transition from with going from digital to traditional, because when I was doing digital art, I had the freedom to change my colors at any point in the process, while with traditional, it's much more difficult to just change up the color of something once you've already put down a color. So going into it with a strong idea of what my color palette is going to be is really crucial for me to kind of have a good foundation of my painting and make sure it doesn't just become a muddy mess of me changing my mind about colors the way that I used to when I was just doing digital art. So that's why I do take time to look at references and look through things like these color dictionaries just to make sure I'm really confident about the palette that I'm choosing. I think these are my favorite shades of blue to potentially use for the background. I do like this light glaucous blue and this salvia blue, but I think I really want to try and avoid pastels because I'm moving away from that a lot in my paintings at the moment. Okay, so I think I'm at the point now where I've sussed out my color palette and composition that I'm going to go for this piece. I did 3 little color thumbnails here. They're all very similar color palette wise. I think this one was kind of my favorite one out of the 3. The next thing that I did was do a more detailed kind of mock-up, I guess, of how this might look, including all the colors that I might want to use within the piece, where the cat's positioned, like the hands and all of that. And then I also did like a separate sketch just to kind of define the items a little bit more. I always find like in this stage, I'm still mostly thinking about color. So sometimes like the cat and the details can look a bit wonky. I feel like I actually could have gone into like a bit more detail than I have here, just because I mean, I've kind of defined what all the items are, like the carrots here, tomato, apple, the bread, the flowers, and the lettuce behind the cat's head. But I haven't really done like much detailed sketching in terms of like where I'm going to put the shadows and the highlights and all of that. The hands is probably still the roughest part. I'm kind of imagining that the hands themselves will be block color, and then the sleeves will be like white outline, kind of like what I did here in that piece. I feel like I'm probably ready to sketch this out onto an actual page now and then think about doing the underpainting. So I will show you that next. So I thought this might be a good moment to just talk a little bit about the actual materials that I'm choosing to use for this painting, and kind of in general at the moment for traditional artwork, which is gouache. The brand that I specifically use right now are the Winsor and Newton set. I would say that these are like a mid-range of gouache paint. They're probably not by any means like the cheapest that you can get, but they aren't like super specialist. I think they're a very like sort of middle of the road, decent, solid paint to start with. So part of the reason honestly that I used these is just because they were what I had. I believe that I got these from my mum. I've talked about it in previous videos, but I have a tendency to take on a new hobby and then just immediately buy a load of top of the range equipment for it before I've even decided if I like it or not. And I really didn't want that to be the case here. So I decided that I would use gouache partially just because I had a set of gouache paints. I do really like gouache. I like the artwork that I've seen other illustrators make with gouache. I felt like I would be able to represent my digital style quite well in gouache as well. I would have loved to get back into oil painting. That was something I really loved at school specifically, but I know that it just requires so many materials and so much setup, and also like a reasonable amount of space and ventilation, and I just wasn't ready to commit to that right now. So gouache was a better medium for me in terms of the fact that you don't need too many extra materials. You just need water and paint. Also, I think it's more forgiving than watercolor, but less quick drying than acrylic. I like that you can reactivate the paint with water to make changes, and I like that you can water it down to get more of those kind of washy watercolor looks with it in a way that's more difficult with acrylic. The fact that it can be reactivated with water also means you don't waste too much paint, because anything that's dry on my palette I can just add water to continue using, which I really like. So I shouldn't have to replace this set too quickly, depending on how many paintings I start to make. It has been about a week now since I've had the chance to work on this, because I've just had other things on my plate and I was away at the weekend. But I'm excited to get back into it. I'm at the point now where the sketch is mostly there, and I just want to finish off my underpainting, and then I will let that dry, and then I will get into the main kind of painting session, I guess. I reckon today and then maybe Thursday I'll spend on it, and then we'll see how far I get. I might also spend a little time at the weekend if I don't finish it on Thursday. But by the end of this week, I would love it to have this piece done. So let's get into the underpainting. It feels kind of funny to be in a position where I'm needing to get back into painting traditionally again, because I'd spent so long absorbed in it when I was younger. As a university student, although I had been using a drawing tablet for a few years at that point, it definitely wasn't where I felt the most comfortable. I was very attached to sketching physically on paper with pencils, and for a long time, if I was going to do a digital painting, I would actually draw the sketch on paper first and then I would scan it into the computer because I was just way more comfortable working that way. The same goes for Procreate on my iPad. It took me a good year or two to really get comfortable with that interface because I just missed the tactility of sketching on paper. I had quite a lot of art fatigue from my third year of uni. So when I graduated, not feeling like I constantly had to be drawing made me really not want to touch my sketchbooks in my free time for a while. And when it came to my job, I was very reliant on digital art anyway, as opposed to traditional. So fast forward 5 years or so, and aside from starting the odd sketchbook here and there, I had totally lost the knack for traditional painting. It does go to show that regardless of the medium or your previous experience, you'll often have to go through an uncomfortable stage when trying to relearn a skill that you haven't used in a while. I know people always talk about like the ugly stage in the painting, and maybe it's like kind of a cliche to be like it's in the ugly stage, but it is in the ugly stage right now, and whenever it is, I just find it so hard to film because I'm like, don't look at it, I don't want anyone to see it. It's gross. And also because I feel like when it's in this stage, I spend so long just staring at it, trying to work out why it's ugly and how I'm gonna like get it to where I want it to go, that it's like the hardest stage for me to document. Like a lot of the time I will literally just not film until it starts to look cute again, but I'm trying to power through that and actually document it, like for myself and for other people, I guess, because it's always annoying when you have like a massive gap in your footage after you finish recording your painting process. And also because I need to see how I actually get out of these ugly ruts, because I always do, I usually do at least, like it will not stay like this, but there's always a moment when I'm painting where I just think this is a pile of poo. This is another thing, like with the sketch stage probably being more important than I'm, I guess, giving it credit for now, is like I feel like the hands are too small, and that's the kind of thing that's so easy when you're like digitally painting to just adjust on the fly, but obviously when you're doing traditional it's not that easy anymore. So I think I need to really double check my proportions and scale during the sketch phase before I actually put paint down, because now it would just be so hard to change the size of this hand. So I'm either gonna maybe paint them in and see how I think that they look, see if I can like make them a little bit bigger, make them look more like I want them to, and if not, I might paint over them and get rid of the hands. I don't know, the hands have always been a bit that I wasn't sure about with this painting, but I don't know, decisions to be made. Okay, I swear I turned the camera off and only now do I feel like I'm getting somewhere. I don't know what it is. When the camera's on, I just can't perform. But it's still ugly, don't worry. But I've improved the paper bag a little bit, and I'm documenting this so that I know what I did. I actually started using a smaller brush, and also I had to make sure that the paint was thick enough and not too wet, because with gouache I always find you have to layer it up like kind of like thin layers to thick layers, and if you do like a thinner layer over a thicker layer, it will just end up looking muddy and messy, and it will start to like blur the colors underneath. So yeah, I needed to kind of like dry out my brush a little bit before using it, and use less paint. It's sort of like starting to look a little bit nicer now, so fingers crossed we are getting out of the ugly stage. While I have been painting blissfully for some time, I am about to come up on another one of those uncomfortable moments here after realizing I still wasn't happy with some areas of my painting. I'd been painting for hours, and I don't know why, I just suddenly took one look at the face after adding in those details to the eyes and the nose, and I felt like this overwhelming hatred. I couldn't unsee those medieval cat paintings for some reason looking at the face. The cat just felt like an evil little humanoid gargoyle to me in this moment. I think looking back, I was maybe overreacting a bit, but I don't know, I was just suddenly like, I hate this. The hand was really bugging me too. It felt so small and lacking in angularity compared to the rest of the elements. And that's how this happened.
For real?
If I couldn't use the analog undo button, I could at least use the analog delete button, which in this case was using water first to reactivate the layers of paint that I had applied and then dabbing them away with a paper towel. Maybe I did overreact, but it's good to know there is technically a way to go back when you really loathe a bit of your gouache painting. Anyway, after that, I decided I could use a break from painting, so I took a moody little walk in the park and then went to the one place I knew could make me feel better. So at this point, I did what I probably should have done from the very beginning. I actually took a reference photo of my own hand, and this helped massively. I know this is just like a tried and tested method for a lot of artists. I should have thought of it sooner. But yeah, it does work. Just use yourself as a reference photo if you're ever trying to draw like a part of the human body that you just can't get right, because it really helped me have something to guide me. And I was much happier with the second try at this hand. I did also improve the cat's face off camera. I think I just couldn't face filming at that point. I need to get better at that. Just filming, even when I don't like my art, because it would have been cool to see how I did that. But yeah, I think I just went in and like maybe smoothed out a bit of the shadows that I didn't like and simplified it a little bit and improved the eyes. And yeah, I think it came out a lot cuter after I did that. This idea that I want to add like a cute little phrase underneath the painting, and I actually want to like put it underneath in quotation marks, which is kind of scary because I have to like draw directly on it, but you know, it'll be fine. I'm not usually very precise with these things, but I'm actually gonna try and measure out where I want it to be, so that it's not like askew or unbalanced, because I know that will just really annoy me. So let's see. Hello and welcome to the outro of this vlog. Thanks for sticking with me. I mean, I'm happy to say I no longer hate this piece as much as I did when I first finished it. I think that time has healed many wounds and I now actually think it's quite cute and I like the colours and I'm proud of what I achieved, and especially as a learning experience, it was definitely worth it. I think the main thing that I've learned from this process is that taking reference photos and being really confident in my light source before I start painting, I think will help me a lot going forward. And I also feel like I could have probably done some smaller studies before I did the final painting. For example, like of some of the groceries that I wanted to put in the bag or the cat's face and all of that. I think I could have done studies before that might have made me more confident when going into this finished piece. At the same time, I do not want to dwell too much on the negatives because I have a habit of really focusing on all of the bits that I don't like in a painting, when really I do think I set out to achieve what I wanted to with this, which was just to get more comfortable with the medium, to explore some brighter colors than my usual color palettes, and to just see if I could kind of represent a style that was like my digital art with gouache paints. Although I am a control freak and that a lot of the techniques that I've used in this video are to help give me a semblance of control over traditional painting methods, one of the beautiful things about traditional art is that lack of control. So I suppose that's another lesson of this piece too, is that sometimes you do need to let go of control and just let the process be the process, baby. Anyway, I think that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this vlog. It's something different, like I said. It's like my first process kind of focus video on YouTube, so I'm really happy that I was able to do it and not be too squeamish to show you guys the behind the scenes. If you liked seeing my process, then please let me know in the comments. If there's anything that you want to know more about that I kind of glossed over in this video, please let me know as well, because I would like to maybe make this a series where I take you along on more of my painting adventures. So yeah, also if you come this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, I would love it if you liked the video. I will be continuing to share videos monthly at the least. So if this all seems like your kind of thing, to follow me on my small business journey, to follow me on my art making journey, then feel free to subscribe. I think that's it. I'm gonna close out now. Thank you all again, and I will see you next time. Bye.